وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to season 3 of the Safina Society podcast. We are joined today by our regular crew, Brother Ilyas, Saad, and Dr. Shadi. And we have joining us Nazmul Hassan as well. You'll be hearing him and Yusuf Hussein throughout the season a little bit more, along with Mufti Niyaz. So we'll talk about that in future episodes. But inshallah, he's joining us today for our episode. So how you guys been? It's been like last time we actually recorded was what, Mad Mamluks?
Yeah, well, we did the Mad Mamluks. I think we had a couple solos in between, but it's always good to get everyone together.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not easy doing these podcasts, getting everyone together, but alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
And we have an episode coming out, another solo one with Nazmul and Dr. Shadi on the problem of evil. I'm going to say it live on here so they can be held to a date.
we're doing it Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
We're doing it Wednesday.
We're gonna do it Wednesday.
So inshallah, that should be a good one. They're going to be covering the problem of evil and theodicy. And I know we've claimed to cover the problem of evil in 2 previous episodes, but we don't think we did a good job on that. So
No, we did a great job. But it's just
Speak for yourself.
See,
man.
you're-
we did a great job.
We just started this season and you're already wrong.
Who is this guy?
I don't think we did a good
Listen,
job.
we did a great job. The skeptic and atheist will never be satisfied, and that's why Allah said about that, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. Don't even ask, because you'll never be satisfied. Likewise, the issue of qadar, for example, destiny.
So you
What
just
Imam Ibn
compared
Haddad
me.
said. No. You might be thinking from the perspective of the questioner.
Yeah.
And I've seen these people before, Muslims,
Yeah.
who approach the matter not from an issue of submission and belief, but from a rational basis. They're never satisfied, and they're never satisfied with qadar or evil, right? And we say to them, you're approaching it from the perspective of a kafir, to be
Right,
honest with
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Because Allah says, لا يسأل عما يفعل. So we already know that the Prophet is... The real only two questions are this. There is only one question, if you think about it. Is the Prophet ﷺ true or false? Because if the Prophet ﷺ was true in his claim, that means Allah exists. That means the Quran and Sharia are all true. That's the only real question we need to ask, right?
Yeah.
Then part of the package is لا يسأل عما يفعل. He's not asked.
It's absolutely right, Sheikh. I was having this conversation with someone, recentish convert, and he was saying, there's some issues that I come across, and sometimes I feel like I'm not sure about these things, right? And I said, well, listen, forget about delving into the details of a fiqh ruling or whatever. Do you believe that God exists? 100% sure. That's not a question, right? So we're past that with him, alhamdulillah. And then my next question was, what's better than Islam? What's more believable? What's more rational? What makes better sense to you? Any of these other religions? Would you rather be a Hindu?
فبأي حديث بعده يؤمنون? What other belief do you have?
Yeah,
that you can
exactly.
believe? Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, absolutely not. I said, well, and that's all you really need to do. And then the rest of it is trust in Allah and, move forward and expect that if it's not revealed to you in this life, it'll be revealed to you in the next.
So what Mu'in meant, I know what he meant, which is that there are different angles to the question.
Sure.
And what you meant is that the structure of how we structured it was more fluid than systematic, right?
Well, now we have Sheikh Nazmul.
There you go. I'm not a sheikh.
Nazmul, what's your job actually?
I'm a
He's another
Bismillah.
IT guy.
Bismillah. This is my first time speaking loud.
Bring it closer.
How was it your first time when you had a solo?
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Okay.
Forgot about that. I'm actually a software developer. So,
Okay,
Yeah,
well that's good.
I do the same thing that
We all three of
What
us.
kind of software do you develop though? Like video games?
No, not video games. Alhamdulillah.
Video.
Just web applications like UI.
Like which one that went out there that was popular? Monday.com?
None of my work is public.
He works for
So I work for
Comcast.
Comcast. So
Oh, you produce
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
for them.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. I thought you meant like
That's all.
public stuff. Like.
nobody
Sheikh,
uses my
it's
stuff.
me and you and
Yeah.
then a bunch of Desi IT people. Not that there's anything wrong with it.
I'm the closest one to being an IT person. Like you guys, I know Saad's like it's like a designer. And
I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close.
Do you know that a world without pain
Designer.
would require a complete alteration of everything in the world, right? A world without pain would change everything, right?
It's true.
Because a world without pain would mean that there are no victors, because one of the pains is the pain of loss, the pain of defeat. There'd be no victory, right? It would necessitate no free will, right? It would necessitate no free will, because if There's no pain. There's no infliction of someone doing pain on someone else. So you have to stop him from having any free will to do that. So if you're going to stop that, you're going to stop every other free will, right? All other you can't selectively stop free wills, because if I do something like get a job over someone else, okay, half my family celebrating, his family's crying, right? So if we eliminated that pain, you also eliminated that happiness, the opposing happiness. So so this is what Nazmul, what he's gonna do is, let's just say Naz. Can we just say Naz?
Yeah, Naz.
It's way cooler than Nazmul. How could you have gone this long as Nazmul, right?
People call me by my last name,
Which is
it's Hassan.
Hassan.
Yeah.
They didn't even pronounce that right. Nas, period.
Nas, Haas.
Yeah, Nas, something like that.
Nas
No,
the rapper.
so that's basically what Nas has done is structured it. Sheikh Nuh and See Without Shore has structured it, right, in different things. So I'm assuming that's what you're talking about.
Yes,
the
that's what I
structure.
meant. That's obviously
Yeah,
what I meant. Yeah.
So continue on with your intro that you were.
So the episode that we're going to talk about today, and the topic that we're going to talk about is why revealed knowledge is greater than empirical knowledge. And an incident that I'd like to talk about recently that occurred. I mean, Saad sent me a video, I think last week or a few days ago, about a show we used to watch, and it was about a villain, and he's talking about ebooks, right, in the future. And so it's actually an anime show called Psycho Pass, and it's a villain who lives in the future. The show takes place in the future. I'm not going to go into the background of the show, but it's about ebooks, and he's talking about the concept of ebooks, and the other guy's like, I read everything on ebooks. So the villain Makishima, he says, I prefer to read on real books, right? Because real books have a feeling that is beyond just reading on a digital screen, right? The actual smell of the paper, the tactile feedback of actually reading, that even when you're reading a book, right, you may be reading something and you may not actually comprehend what you're reading, but the tactile feedback of moving the pages of your mind, glossy, of reading through the words makes a difference.
This guy sounds like a hipster.
He is.
Also a big criminal.
He was a psycho, but I mean, a lot of his points, made a lot of sense. And the reason I bring that example up is because of this idea that, there are experiences and there is knowledge that is beyond the empirical. And that's why I brought that example up, right? He says that, the experiential knowledge is that's a type of knowledge that's not empirical, but we all admit that it exists. And so one great example that somebody posted in our notes is that take a person that's colorblind, right? Let's this woman, she cannot see any type of color.
Sexist.
All right.
Just kidding.
So she can't see. She's colorblind, but she reads on the study of the color red and studies about it. She reads about all the different spectrums of light, and she knows everything there is to know about the color red, right? From the wavelength it has to how it hits your hits your eyes, everything. Now, nobody with rational faculties would say that. Let's say now this person goes from being colorblind to being blind. Being colorblind to now being able to see in color. Now she sees red. Is her knowledge of red different than it was before?
That's totally different.
Why?
It's experience now.
Whatever it might be, I think all human beings who are rational, who see this example, can all accept that her knowledge before and after is different, right? So that we can accept that there is knowledge that is not necessarily empirical.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
And that's where I kind of want to set the stage for the episode, and where I kind of want to take this is what is the importance of revealed knowledge, and it's not to throw out empirical knowledge, because that's important as well, but maybe so why
unless you're
that?
a friend, unless you take like Hume's view of skepticism, where even empirical knowledge is not solid. It's not what we think it is, right? So according to Hume's view, we should be skeptical even of the things that we think are purely empirical,
That
right?
are sensory perception.
Yeah, because sensory perception relies on past experience to give meaning to what we're experiencing in the present.
And is limited to perspective.
Of course.
There's also the assumption that what has happened in the past is going to happen in the future,
Which is
an
not-
assumption.
Which is an
right?
assumption
So-
that's not necessary, really has no basis, right? It's all just speculative.
Right.
And
So
all-
even empirical knowledge, it's all based on this speculation
Yeah.
that the present and future will resemble the past, and we only believe that because of our experiences, not because of anything that's concretely verifiable. Empirical is the wrong name for empirical knowledge.
So by empirical, you're talking about observable sensory perception, knowledge of sensory perception, which is basically that. Give an example that of where it can be dubious. You're talking about, like, for example, the shadow.
I'll give a great example for Muslims, right? So empirically, you would say that the sun always
Rise from the east.
rises
As
from
a
the
fact.
east. It's a fact. It's an empirical fact. Well, how do we know? Because it always has.
Yes.
And then I saw it do it again this morning. So
Yeah.
for sure it's going to tomorrow until the day it rises from the west.
Yeah. So that's the black swan case, right? The idea that swans are always been defined as white birds with long necks, et cetera, until one day in Australia they discovered an actual black swan.
Right.
So as a question, because I know Moeen made the distinction between, right, something that you experience, right, like in the case of the woman being colorblind, her actually experiencing the color red for the first time versus observable phenomena. So how are the two distinct?
Well,
I
here's-
guess in that
here's
case,
one
right?
case.
Yeah.
First of all, the Muslims, the Sunni theologians, put a great limit on the type of empirical knowledge that assigns something as a fact simply because it has always happened, right? And we put that in a balance where it's not a rational impossibility that the reverse happens.
Right.
So there's a big difference between saying that the sun will always rise from the east as a statement of fact, okay, and that there's no such thing as square circles as a fact, right? So the one is logical; it's a rational impossibility because it's the two words are and always will be mutually exclusive, square and circle.
Yeah.
However, it's in the qudra of Allah, is in the power of Allah Ta'ala to make the sun rise from the west, make fire not burn, make water not drown, make sugar not sweet. That's
Well,
possible.
And the other thing that comes from what you were just saying, Doc, is that when you accept the so-called empirical worldview, you also automatically assign causation. And causation can be randomness, it can be, laws of nature, alleged laws of nature, right, that are unchangeable and immutable, but they don't necessarily need to be.
Yeah.
And you exclude the true cause of all things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So I guess what I was asking was, isn't the woman, right, in your example, and maybe the example, it's out of the scope of the example, but isn't the woman observing the color red, isn't that an empirical observation, right? Like she sees the color red? Like how is that not empirical? I guess my question is.
I think it's not the observable phenomenon that's the change in the knowledge. It's the because she already knew everything there was to know about the color red, right? Before she even got to see it. So technically, her empirical knowledge hasn't increased. She already knew everything there was to know about red. It's only her experiential knowledge of the color red that's changed.
So you know how we would put it? We would put it that there's three types of knowledge. There's transmitted knowledge, rational knowledge, and sensory knowledge, or observable knowledge. And transmitted knowledge can lend you knowledge of something. Rational knowledge, okay, rational basis for that lends you something else, and then finally seeing that lends you a different angle. So what you're saying is now her transmitted knowledge can only take you to a limit, right? And then once you add now sensory perception to it, okay, you're adding a higher level. So Imam al-Ghazali says someone who's heard about a fire, that there's a fire in the woods, someone who's seen it with his own two eyes, and someone who's felt its heat. The three are different. And in the Quran we have ilm al-yaqeen, that you've heard about something, ayn al-yaqeen, you've seen something, and haqq al-yaqeen, you've experienced something. And the highest is haqq al-yaqeen. But interestingly, Imam al-Ghazali carries on and he says that even if someone possesses haqq al-yaqeen, right, he's still limited. There are certain things he cannot do. For example, just because you've experienced we've seen the color red or we experienced the heat of a fire doesn't mean we can teach a course on it, and vice versa, right? So, for example, the woman who studied everything about the wavelengths of the color red and what it's doing and all that, she could teach a course on it, even if she's never seen it. She's
Right.
colorblind. However, the person who, because that knowledge is the realm of transmission. Whereas just for seeing the color red doesn't necessarily mean we could teach anything about it. So likewise, Imam al-Ghazali also says that most Muslims know Allah experientially, but they can't speak about Allah. And many alims and scholars who have been educated and young people who spent 4 or 5 years in the madrasa can give you a lecture about Allah and they have less experience with Allah.
Subhanallah, there you go.
SubhanAllah.
Right? So that's how it is. They're different and there are superiorities in different ways. And this is where it's actually linked to what we've been trying to say for the last few years of Goofism, is that just because you have had an experience doesn't mean you could talk. Right? And just because you're talking doesn't necessarily mean you're claiming an experience. Right?
Wow, I think
That's
we
the
answered. We're good.
I think that's a wrap.
I just want to go back to the example. It's called the Sally and the color red. So if people want to look it up, just look up Sally and the problem of
There's a
knowledge.
wiki on it.
Yeah, it's a paper by
Oh,
this
okay.
philosopher.
Well, the philosophers
So-
always try to make their things sound like cute. The title. or the
So
concept put it to sleep.
did I explain it correctly though? I mean, what's the difference between her knowledge? You know, like as Saad said, because now I'm curious about his question. Isn't it still empirical knowledge going from, you know, seeing the color and not knowing about the color and then seeing it? Isn't that still
So
empirical?
it's still empirical knowledge, but the point of that thought experiment was to show that materialism is false, right? Because the materialist would say that everything that you would need to know about the world is contained within like objects, like
Okay,
stuff.
I have a
right?
question
Yeah.
for that you probably came across in your
Yeah.
rebuttals of these things.
Yeah.
You just said that the materialist philosophy,
Yeah.
which is that everything that is knowable is only knowable empirically.
Right.
How is that thesis proven empirically?
It's not. It's not.
How is that assertion is
Right,
not
right.
even?
It's not.
This is why materialism, like as a philosophy, is not. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere, right? Because it's self-contradictory. But that particular experiment was to show that consciousness, right? Consciousness, we can all agree, is something immaterial, right?
Right.
Because it's not something we can find under a microscope. It's not something we can sort of. Like, oh, there's consciousness. Go look it up. you
There's
know?
also no effect, no cause that can bring it into effect.
Right,
No
exactly,
known cause
right.
that can bring it into effect.
Right.
Yeah.
No material cause, for that matter.
Right.
So this example of Sally knowing everything about the color red, but still being colorblind, it doesn't give her enough knowledge for her to say, I know the color red. It's only when she's conscious of it, right? Only when she's conscious of it, she gains a new knowledge that's not material. You know what I mean?
So
It's not material. So therefore, this type of experience, even though it's empirical, it's something. There's an added thing to it.
the conscious understanding.
The conscious understanding, which is not empirical.
Now,
right?
define for the
Yeah.
audience
Uh-huh.
what, because I know some of them are going to be on Wikipedia if they're really interested. But how do you actually define empirical for a common person who's listening, or a college freshman who's listening?
Yeah.
How would you define empirical?
Empirical is just through any knowledge that comes through the five senses.
Okay, so that's what we said
Yeah,
as
yeah,
sensory
yeah.
perception. I
So the British empiricists. So this tradition of empiricism comes through the British philosophers like Locke and Hume and so on. They thought that human beings start off with a blank slate, right?
Right.
And the outside world makes impressions. So imagine the human mind is like a cushion,
Yeah.
and impressions are like sort of put into this cushion, and then that's how you sort of get experience, right?
Yeah.
And your entire knowledge is sort of built off of this. But then, as Alex pointed out, this leads to a denial of causation. It leads to a denial of like any type of rational thought, because if all your knowledge is just coming from empirical, just empirical impressions, right? You saying that, okay, the ball breaking the glass there's a cause between the ball and the glass, right?
Right.
That's something you added in there.
Right.
That's not something you see empirically, right?
But-
Say
but-
that.
but-
Say that one more time.
But someone
So-
will
No,
say
he's
we
saying
did see it
causation
No,
is inferred.
you saw the interaction, but you did
But
not
you
see that
inferred
the
the
ball
causation.
caused
Yeah.
the
Right,
breaking.
right. You just see.
Then what would you say caused it?
Could be anything.
Could be.
No. So causation itself is something you can't like get empirically.
You're
It's
saying
something.
it's a philosophical assertion.
Yeah,
Ah,
it's
yeah.
something that our mind puts there, right?
It's
so
like
if
the
you're
assertion of it's like the Aristotelian assertion of gravity, right? oh, there's like a magical force. Some things are imbued with levity and others are imbued with heaviness. And so birds fly and humans are stuck to the ground because of like an innate trait, and that's the cause of it.
And which philosophers recognize that idea or admitted to
one?
that?
Oh, that
Causation is philosophical.
well, so like the ones that the British empiricists that
Yeah, so I mean, they would say,
I see. So
yeah,
they themselves are. So in that case, well then, this idea, this assertion of causation, children are born with it.
Well,
in the sense that
So I'm
Well,
I'm gonna back up 1 second, so that we don't go so deep that people are confused. So, somebody listening might have to re-listen to that last like 5-minute segment. Just want to recap it. So can you explain why there would be no, you know, why this causation is assumed once, for example, a ball hits a piece of glass, right? Just to then we'll get to what Dr. Shed's point was.
So it's something that Alex mentioned previously, that all of your, so if you say that all of your knowledge is empirical,
only if
Only,
we're only
right.
admitting empirical knowledge,
Nothing else.
to be certain
Yeah.
about anything.
yeah.
inductive reasoning, not deductive.
Exactly. So all your reasoning is inductive, right? There's no way, there's no ground for you to make rational conclusions, right? Because all your reasoning is inductive. You just see events, you know, A cause B, A cause B, A cause B, because I've seen it the last 2,000 times, right?
Right.
But there's no like, you have to be skeptical, right? There's no way that you can have certainty.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
you're-
I see what you're
you see
saying.
what I mean? Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Absolute certainty
Right,
that
right.
this will always happen in the future.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, but by the way, in Sharia though,
So
the theologians have separated things. The theologians hold, right, and these are not contradictory points. The theologians hold that you're right, that we don't admit this causation, right, and that the fire can one day not burn if Allah wants it not to burn, so that you return everything to Allah Ta'ala. The jurists, however, hold something else. The jurists hold that when we live in day-to-day life, that is admissible evidence. And that's where it could become obligatory to seek medicine. If a person didn't seek medicine for their child based upon this thesis, they could be held accountable for homicidal neglect, for example. Right? And the proof they have for this is that Allah says, "Inna sam'a wal basara wal fu'ada kullu ulaika kana anhu mas'ula," which means that verily the hearing, transmitted knowledge, and wal basar, the seeing, sensory perception, and the heart, reason, okay, all of this you can be asked about. So the jurists hold that even though the theologians are correct, that this is not a real causation, and it is only because Allah is the one, Allah ordained that all the time water will quench thirst, right?
Right.
Or at these times of water, so that you don't go crazy. He created certain cause and effects that are predictable, so you don't go crazy. We believe that, and that the water doesn't have any causation in itself, knife doesn't have a causation in itself, etc. However, the jurists hold that they are actionable items, though. So that, for example, if you don't observe something, if every day you know that gravity exists, and then I give you an iPhone and you stick in front of a toilet, and you say, "Well, the theologian said
it might not happen this time."
the judge will rule for
Right.
me." Right. So there's a distinction that the audience should know.
I mean, that's
is
that's a completely rational distinction too, because otherwise nobody would be able to function on a day-to-day level of like, hey, I step out this door and I'm not going to fly into the sky, so I'm never going to step out the door because out of that fear. So you have to operate on those reasonable
So
assumptions.
then let's make that clear to the audience that there are philosophical discussions that pertain to theology, right, and beliefs, and they are oftentimes different, okay, than what applies to the jurists, fiqh, and everyday actual living.
So, I mean, Muin, you started this off with, I guess, the difference, or forget the Sally thing for now, with the difference between revealed knowledge, right, and empirical knowledge. So maybe we can talk about the distinctions there, and then kind of
that was sort of my next point, which is, you know, so then we understand what empirical knowledge and what is necessarily revealed knowledge. Is it knowledge, for example, that is from hadith? Is it knowledge that that we take from any person in the past, say like, you know, the scriptures of the Bible and the Torah, or is it only the Quran? Like, how do we understand revealed knowledge and how do we differentiate?
So revealed knowledge is under the category of transmitted knowledge. So the ulama place all of religion, Quran, Hadith, everything, in the same category of transmission. It's just that it's sacred, and it's the link ends or rises to the heavens, right? So history, journalism, and revelation are the three transmitted knowledges. Now, journalism is everyday stuff, right? History is within, human behavior, but revelation is a transmission going way back to a prophet, to an angel, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for that reason, the muhaddithin, the muhaddithin, hadith scholars, and scholars in general, historians and journalists have the same principles, but you can imagine that the scholars of religion, they apply those same principles of how to accept a transmission on like steroids, because there's heaven and hell involved. Right?
So what you're talking about in standards is reliability of the
evidence.
sources.
Yeah, of sources. So when it comes to the scholars, let's say Imam al-Bukhari versus a top historian versus a top journalist, the journalist will be considered the thinnest of threads needed to make an assertion. The historian will need a thicker thread, but the muhaddith, like Imam Bukhari, will need a rope.
Right.
Because now history doesn't affect your day-to-day life. History doesn't affect whether or not you're going to wear hijab.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big deal. That affects my life. It's like affect my life
There's
if
salvific consequences.
right, and also not just salvific, every day.
Yeah.
Right, is study Quran language. So everyday life is affected. So I could be really bothered. Think about this: and I think I talked about this before. The transmission of one narration that is so basic could alter a woman's life. For example, a very small thing. Women, if they have a really thick eyebrow, or it's connected a little bit, right? There's a narration from Ibn Mas'ud, okay, that states that I can get this actually.
Oh, sorry.
There's a narration that's where Ibn Mas'ud, a woman had cleaned up her eyebrows, right? And Ibn Mas'ud says Allah has cursed this behavior, right? And she said, how can you say that when the Quran hasn't done that, right? Said anything like that? She said, because she was his wife's friend, and she was coming in. And he forbid the wrong, right? He said Allah is cursed. So she said, it's not in the Quran. She said, it is. He said, it is, because the Quran says obey the Prophet. And he said, the Prophet never said this, right? And then he cited something, but in fact, he cited something from himself, basically, how he understood it. The Prophet ﷺ had made a statement, which he cited, which he understood as including cutting the eyebrow hair.
Right.
That's how he understood it.
Right.
So now this is now transmitted as the Prophet has cursed the one who trims eyebrows. So a Muslim girl, let's say, is growing up, her eyebrows are a bit bushy. And unfortunately, I don't have the exact saying. Unfortunately, I apologize because it's not on my mind right now. But she has
hadith?
the exact hadith, yeah, from Ibn Mas'ud. But it's that she now then will not do this, and she will go to school, and she will be looked at, and she feel weird because everyone else does it. Now, that transmission is actually the Malikis did not accept it because they accepted the transmission of Sayyidah Aisha. A woman asked Sayyidah Aisha, I'm about to get married. Can I clean up my eyebrows? Right? She said, not only clean up your eyebrows, if you can actually replace your eyes and put new ones, right? Okay, do it. In other words, and there's multiple hadiths from Sayyidah Aisha permitting that. Right? So that's an example where a transmission, a single transmission, okay, will have a day-to-day effect on a person. And you might think, wow, how is this a big deal? Well, it is a big deal. That's on your face. It's part of your face. Your face is a big deal, right? So in the Maliki school, it is permitted. The only time it's not permitted is in ihdad, which is when mourning period after the husband dies, right? That's the only time it's not permitted. And the intention should be for the husband. In other words, to look good in marriage, right? But it's permitted throughout.
Also, I mean, and I think another. This mic is about to fall over. So I feel like another benefit in transmitted knowledge over empirical knowledge is just the time element, right? For example, I can learn that fire is going to burn me by putting my hand in a fire, right? And that's an empirical method. I conducted an experiment, I put my hand in a fire, and it burned. But that's the hard way of learning something. Somebody could tell me, hey, don't put your hand in that fire, it's going to burn you. That's a shortcut to that knowledge without having to go the empirical route, right? True. And so that's actually a benefit that transmitted knowledge has over empirical knowledge.
Totally true.
Because I don't have to arrive at that conclusion myself.
That also raises a point that I was going to make, which is that the vast majority of what people are calling empirical knowledge is actually transmitted knowledge.
Yeah.
And by the way, what you said is very true, and it's what every parent says to their son. Listen, I've made these mistakes. Don't make these mistakes. Now, here's something that's very important to know, though. Transmitted knowledge, even though it's a shortcut, it does sort of, in a sense, handicap a person, because empirical experiences give a person deeper knowledge, more certain knowledge. That's why, all right, why can Malcolm X go and tell gangsters to come off the street and I can't, right? Because he's experienced it. He knows how to everything about it. Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab was keenly aware of this when he looked upon the born Muslim kids, teenage kids who grew up in Darul Islam, never seen an idol in their life, never seen kufr, never had anyone throw a rock at them for being a Muslim, never saw a sword being pulled out on them. He looked and he worried, right? And he said Islam can end or can weaken at the hands of these folks. Why? I saw kufr. I know kufr. They don't. So in that sense, transmitted knowledge, of course, is a shortcut, and by transmitted we don't just mean revelation. All transmitted knowledge, but at the same time, experience is also.
It lends credibility.
Now, I want to just for the sake of the hadith. So Sayyidina Abdullah bin Mas'ud, said he cursed the women who practiced tattooing, and those who removed hair from their faces, and those who created spaces between their teeth, because they used to like that in the past. Okay. Now the woman said, "How could you say that?" He said, "It's not in the book of Allah." He said, "It is in the book of Allah, where Allah says, obey God and obey His Messenger." Right. So he didn't actually even quote the Prophet ﷺ. He gave a ruling, then attributed the ruling to the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. So for that reason, the scholar Malik, the Shafi'i, they didn't give it the weight of a hadith. They gave it the weight of a tafsir, right? Because he didn't quote the Prophet at all. He gave a ruling, and then he attributed the ruling to the Prophet ﷺ without citing him. Malik says the narration of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha is greater, because he said if Sayyidah Aisha is telling women to do it, right, it's a woman's issue. Who's going to know more, Ibn Mas'ud or Aisha, right? So they outweighed it by that. So, and also all of the actual hadith of the Prophet ﷺ against tattooing, that is from the words of the Prophet ﷺ. None of them include the fixing up of eyebrows. None of the hadiths of the Prophet.
Can I just as a quick aside?
Yeah.
In the science of hadith transmission, when a hadith comes from one of the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, for instance, right? Radiallahu anhu, there's no necessity for it to be verified by a second person.
It doesn't. So the idea of testimony requiring two,
it's limited to certain categories, and not even the most important one in the world,
which is transmitted the deen of Allah.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
And for those people who are interested in that question, that legal issue, Imam Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, hafidhahullah, taught us the opposite. He taught it. He taught us that the reasoning is the opposite of what people think. That the reasoning is that it's only in those matters where someone would lose, like a limb or their life, a crime, or a lot of money, right? Where a person would suffer great loss, that Allah does not want them to be the reason that a man suffered that loss. It might haunt them for the rest of their lives.
Allahu Akbar.
So He made it difficult for that reason. So Allah Ta'ala made it difficult for the woman to testify against a murder, against an issue like that, where a person would suffer a corporal or a financial loss. So that's how Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, and he said it's limited to those only.
And aside from the aside, I've never listened to Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, hafidhahullah, except that he came up with something that nobody else had ever said, that I never heard anybody
Yeah.
else say. And then it's verifiable and there's proofs and there's citations and there's no
Yeah.
question that it's legitimate, but it's completely
It's a
something nobody else had
Yeah.
ever thought of.
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi is one of those that he doesn't speak without a transmission. You know that, right?
Yeah.
He does. He's actually, one of his hobbies is looking at chains of transmission. So transmitted. That's why I said the hadith, the scholars of Islam, it's transmission on steroids. He literally has books, and I've seen him chit chatting with people. Oh, he transmits from him. No, he transmits from him, right? And he knows the lines of transmission because that's our deen. Right.
Yeah. The other person that's like that with stuff that you'll hear and you go, I've never heard this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's 100% true. Is
Yeah.
Ibrahim Ofsiyah. Sheikh
Ofsiyah.
Ibrahim Ofsiyah, mashallah.
All right. What else you got, Moeen?
That's it. That's a wrap.
Okay, can I jump in for a little bit?
Go
what,
for it,
what are
bro.
the angles? I guess. The mic
Oh
keeps falling
snap!
over.
This is why our mic broke.
Yeah, we.
Well, did you say the fire sound is gone now after that mic fell?
yeah.
Yeah. So it must be from that. Okay. Keep
We
going.
don't know.
So
We're
you were
gonna
gonna interject something?
Yeah. So I get this idea of having transmission and verifying these chains, right? So, but somebody might ask, so let's say like a Hindu, he might have chains of transmission going back to his Brahmin sheikh.
Okay.
Well, not
To
sheikh.
where? Up
To
to what?
to some experience that he had of Vishnu or Brahma, whatever. So like,
Yeah. Okay. Good
So,
question. Keep going.
right. So what distinguish? So just because we have an authentic chain
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that knowledge that we have is revealed knowledge, right?
You're
No, it
assuming that they
does.
have a chain.
Well, let's say they claim it, right?
No, but they have to show it.
So okay, so let's say they show.
There's two accounts. The first.
Some of them
account-
do claim it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say they do. They have a claim of a guy who saw his jinn.
Right.
It's a jinn.
Yeah.
If he doesn't know it, it's a jinn. Don't move that thing around.
What's that?
So
Yeah, it keeps falling over.
Yeah.
keep your hand on it, but don't move it because I
Okay.
can hear it.
Yeah.
We got a rookie on the podcast.
Cosmos getting.
It was only a matter of time before.
Yeah.
Keep your hand
That's
on it,
fine.
but don't move
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Alright.
Now, okay, he has a chain of transmission to a guy who levitated. Okay, and claims.
Right.
Fine. We don't believe in the Prophet ﷺ because he had spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
We believe in the Prophet ﷺ because he brought us rational evidences
Right.
that would indicate that he's nothing other than a prophet,
Yep.
which are called prophecies, right? That means, and there are three types of prophecies. Only one applies to us. The type of prophecies that he said and it happened before it was written down in a manuscript which we have today. If you quote, well, the Prophet ﷺ said that Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab would be, or Sayyidina Hussein would be assassinated, and he was. Okay, well, where'd you get that? The manuscript is there. Well, it happened before the manuscript was written, right? So we don't admit it. And also, the Prophet ﷺ made prophecies that Prophet Isa would come back, Sayyidina Mahdi would come back, Dajjal would come. Well, it hasn't happened yet, so that is not admitted into the discussion either. What is admitted is when the Prophet said something, and it was written down by human beings, and we have those documents in front of us, at a time when that thing didn't exist, and today it exists. So it leaves you with a couple options only. Number one, the muhaddith made it up, or the scribe made it up. We would say, okay, so now you want me to believe that the scribe took a gamble on his prophet, and he gambled out, came true. Right?
So that guy's a prophet.
Yeah. And not
Right.
only that,
Right.
that people who didn't even see each other, they never even knew each other, randomly came up with the same gamble on their own prophet, and both of them came true. Because the hadiths come from many different scholars who never met each other. Yani, for example, As-Sun'ani and Bukhari totally unrelated, right? So just because that when people talk about the muhaddithin, they should not imagine that this is a group of people sitting around a circle. They lived at all different places at different times and they didn't even know each other, right?
Right.
In many cases. And didn't even cite each other in many cases. Okay? So it's not like they all cited one another, like a small group who's citing one another and repeating the same thing. So at that case, we would say, okay, you want to say, well, maybe your prophet, he made a prophecy because he's trying to be a prophet, and it happened to come true. We'll tell him, number one, I can give you 50 right now that came true. But that's not really the only proof. We have to go one step further, because you can bring me another guy who made prophecies that came true. Well, let's go one step further. The next step further is, does he have a prophecy that became false? Right? The opposite. Because Nostradamus has a prophecy that became false. He prophesied in the introduction of his book that he said that in like 200 years or something, there will be such plague and famine that people won't even be able to farm. Okay, now Nostradamus, which is a fancy name, his name is actually like Michael of Notre Dame, right?
Yeah.
They want to call it Nostradamus. They make him like a
Yeah,
wizard.
they Latinized it.
Yeah. He's a doctor.
It's like
He's a doctor, by the way, right?
the Great.
What did you say?
He looks like Gandalf.
He's like Gandalf.
Yeah,
look him up. He looks like Gandalf.
he's like a doctor
Yeah.
in Paris.
Yeah.
Okay, and he came up with this book,
Yeah.
and he said, "Now, if you look at this prophecy, it's the exact opposite happened. Industrial Revolution occurred,
Right.
and Europe exploded with wealth and
Right.
farming, and at that time they actually discovered that you could put the seed into the ground,
Yeah.
and it'll give you a 90% chance better to grow.
Right.
So it's not just that the prophet made prophecies, which were documented, that occurred later in our later on. Right? It's not that. It's that you cannot find a single prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ where the opposite happened.
Yeah.
So you didn't fail. Number 3, let's take it to a third level. Someone makes prophecies. Great. Someone's never proven wrong. Great. Are they giving you instruction on how to live? Are they telling you there's heaven and hell? Are they giving you a rock and hard place situation? Because the Prophet Muhammad is.
Yeah.
Prophet ﷺ is saying, here's the proof. Not only that, if you don't follow this, it's eternal hell. Right? So number 3 is, what claim are they making? Okay? So I told you guys about that woman. She's a very nice woman, but she's making theological claims based on her experience that she's these angels. I can't remember what her name is. She's Irish. Okay. My question is, okay, is she making a claim? Like, is she telling me to how to live?
Right.
Is she saying that if I reject her, I go to hell? So there's no claim like that. So why should I care?
Right.
There's no consequence. Number 4 is the last one. All of these people who are in the business, do you have a 5th one? Okay. All these people who are in the business of prophecy and wizardry, okay, they are weird, okay? They're oddballs. They have long nails. They live on the edges of society. They're not examples of life.
Right.
Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is an example of everyday life in everything. He ruled, he did trade, he was solitary at one point in his life, he had families, he had kids, he dealt with death, he dealt with neighbors, he dealt with trade, he did with everything. So on these 4 accounts, and we haven't even discussed the proof of the Quran, right? That's why we accept the Prophet, not just because there's a chain. Now, within the world of accepting the Prophet ﷺ, in order to quote him, now you need a chain.
Right.
All right, so now you have a 5th one?
Just that, for Nazmo's example, there's no way that their chains would stand up to the type of scrutiny that's necessary.
Not
to
even,
verify
not
it.
even
Like, it's
close.
impossible.
Yeah.
They
Not
would be
even
like,
close.
there's no, it doesn't even come close, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even the Christians don't have a chain
No,
to their
not at
book.
all.
Yeah.
Forget about Hindus that are talking about books 5,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago.
Even the Jewish people. I mean,
No,
Yeah.
they don't have chains.
their Bibles was rewritten, right?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah,
Ezra or
there's
something.
there's no chains of
Nobody has
transmission.
chains. And there's only one religion that has chains, and I'm not really worried about that competition. Sikhism.
Yeah, well,
Right? I'm sorry, I'm not even
It's an
worried about
offshoot
that.
of Islam anyway.
I'm not even worried about
it's
that
a heresy.
competition.
Yeah.
It's a
It's
heresy.
a Islamic heresy.
And this actually, Sikhism is a note on another thing too, where when Muslims are told to attack the enemy, okay, in a just war, severely, right? Fight them hard. So if the war is just, fight hard. Don't like go half-hearted in it. Right? وَغْلُظْ عَلَيْهِمْ. Be like stern and rough. So who practiced this? Aurangzeb, the Mujaddid, rahimahullah, wa nafa'ana bih, right? Aurangzeb. So what did he do? His grandfather, Akbar, allowed for Sikh temples to be built because he was a heretic.
What an inappropriate name.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what led to his heresy. I mean, led to
Yeah.
his kufr.
Yeah.
He said,
Allahu Akbar.
yeah, he said, that at the end of it, he was like the Trump of his time, right? But he was like more of like an intellectual and all that stuff.
People are like brainwashed about Aurangzeb.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're like taught that he was like the bad ruler, and Akbar was the one who was like bringing people
Liberal and
together.
stuff, yeah.
There's a changing narrative about that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There was some person in Rutgers, I forget her name, Audrey Truchy or something. She wrote a book called Aurangzeb,
Yeah.
and she basically argued that like his image was portrayed like that by the British.
Yeah.
It was.
Oh yeah, I mean it was
Oh, okay,
British.
that's good.
It was to bring
Yeah.
just strife and stuff into
Yeah, that's true.
into India. So.
And the people who actually
It's always a
have,
safe bet to blame it on the British.
Yeah, that's a safe bet.
Screw the British.
blame the East India
sure.
Company.
and, and the people who had that narrative to begin with,
Yeah.
just as an aside, they're like 1% of people who don't matter. What matters is the people who make dua for him every day,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
that pass by his grave and
Right.
the mu'mineen. Because sometimes we in the West give more credence to people's opinions then really matters, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Akbar allowed all these heresies to flourish. So he allowed for the Sikhs to build their temples. I don't even know if they were called Sikhs, whatever they were called. And of course, we know that it was started off with a mixture of Sufi poetry and it's basically Gufiyya gone wild, right?
Right.
So he then Aurangzeb looked back at this and said, "This was not built legitimately, right? This was not built properly." So he waged war and he tore them down, and they put their guys out, and he put his army out, and they defeated them. And one thing that he said is, "Don't kill their prince, because that would be unnecessary roughness, basically." Right, that would be unnecessary, and it would just inflame them more. So don't kill their elite people. Just tear down, remove the soldiers, push them aside, and tear down the temple. So in the heat of the battle, Aurangzeb's brother ends up killing the prince. Okay, so they then swear an oath that they will never shave their hair, they will never shave their beard, they will never take hot showers again, they will never stop carrying a dagger. And they will always wear a band of their shield forever until they defeat the Muslims. Okay.
Good luck.
Yeah. So now, what did that end up with? What did it end up with? It ended up with what we know now of Sikhism today, is that they have to wear a symbolic dagger. The shield became a symbolic bracelet, right? But they do keep, and I'm sure once they came to America, they got a fatwa that they could take hot showers, right?
But they still don't cut any hair on their body.
But they still don't cut hair and any hair on their
Some
body.
of them.
So what is that?
Men or women?
Yeah,
Some
men
of
or
them.
women.
Some
Okay,
of them.
Some of them. But
Well, the ones that follow.
But
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is that? What is the point here? The point is that we're taught that when you apply the law properly against the enemy, that Allah will cause them to humiliate themselves. Because now, what marketing do they have, right?
Also-
When we pass by as a kid,
Also, yeah.
right? I say Alhamdulillah for Islam.
Alhamdulillah.
Right?
Also,
They just prove
it's kind of
themselves, right?
it's kind of interesting that they added bits of theology based on what another group did to them after
Yeah,
the fact.
exactly. That's
right?
part of their
So-
role.
so
Well,
it's
the
like-
whole thing is made up.
right.
Well, thanks, man.
So did the Shia, but
Yeah.
The whole thing's made up.
Yeah. So you know what? Now the Shia are also another people, right? Now the Shia, they're another people who believe in this hitting on themselves. Now look, I said one time to a common Muslim, a common kid came up to me one time, and he's just to show you the fitrah and what Allah brings on the tongues of people sometimes. He said to me, "Can you believe so and so says this and this and this about Sayyid Aisha and Sayyid Umar?" I said, "You know, these people need to be beaten." He turned around and said, "Sheikh, they already beat themselves." I said, "Subhanallah, right? Subhanallah." So Allah has caused them to go to that extreme to humiliate. I remember growing up and seeing Shias on TV or in a documentary or something, and I said, "That's us." And then my dad said, "No, those are Shias," right? I said, "Alhamdulillah for Ahl Sunnah," right? So groups humiliate themselves, right? The people whom Allah Ta'ala has put a curse upon. Why? Because when you claim a religion, you're making up a lie on Allah.
Right.
Right? Or you're making a lie, and a heresy is a lie on the Prophet. So how does Allah Ta'ala give you, you were talking about observable? How does Allah give you observable proof? Allah doesn't just give us rational proofs. He gives us observable proofs. Number one, Ahl Sunnah, if they're on right aqidah, right fiqh, what do they produce? Awliya. Like you want to be like them. They're beautiful, right? You really want to be like them. Now, heretics, what does Allah do? Look at every heretic. You will find something out there on their features that's disgusting. Right? I'm not even kidding you.
No, it's absolutely
This is
true.
not even subjective, right? Look at the find me one inspiring Wahhabi sheikh that I want to put his picture up on my wall. I can only for the ruling again, to respect the Sharia ruling that we don't put the walls of our mashayikh on the walls, right? To respect the Sharia ruling that there's a difference of opinion on that. The bulk of them say no, we don't put pictures up on the walls. But look at look up if you're listening to this, Google Murabat Ahmed Fad and tell me that's not a man of Allah. Look it up, Sad.
A long time ago, somebody was.
spell this.
Murabat Ahmed Fad.
I saw
Murabat Ahmed Fad.
Ahmed Fad.
Yeah.
I saw a blog post a long time ago, back in the blogging days,
Yeah.
where somebody had posted a bunch of pictures of like commonly known Ahl Sunnah sheikhs, right? So like people like Sheikh Muhammad Yaqubi, Habib Omar, right? Like the regular sheikh, all of them beaming.
Oh
beautiful.
my gosh.
And then they also posted all of the Wahhabi sheikh, and it was like, for real?
Yeah. Now I'm looking at this picture of Murabat Ahmed Fad. Look at that.
MashaAllah, he's
Like
beautiful.
His mustache is handsome, right? His teeth are beaming,
Yeah.
and they don't have dentists. It's the sunnah of miswak, right? Look at his face. His beard is nicely kept. Like
Yeah.
I would take him with me to school. Do you know the metaphor they say? Like, yeah, I like him. I wouldn't take him with me to school, right? You know when people say that? Now these are
I don't remember that. I've never heard that one.
Why would you take
right. Like if you're a kid in show and tell, right?
Oh, like a show and tell.
Like
Okay.
that.
I get
So
it.
you guys never heard that before?
No.
Oh, that was common in my day, right? So now, when I grew up knowing a lot of Salafi sheikhs, right?
Right.
It's like I would, I respected them because that's what I knew, but I didn't want my friends to see that, right? But Murabat Ahmed Fad, I would love for someone to see it, right? I mean, subhanAllah, nails clipped, clean, crisp, merciful. Okay, merciful, right?
This is
He's
the
so
description
merciful.
of the beautification of the Sunnah and the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as opposed to people who, they may be religious and they may be righteous people and they may be dedicated to the Quran and dedicated to their Deen, but the like next level love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's downplayed.
No, totally.
And even the Sunnah, you know, it's replaced by like cultural stuff. So like you throw on one of those gurtas instead of putting on a turban.
Oh yeah.
Because a turban is what? Just the like the core sunnah of dress, right?
Yeah.
So let's abandon it.
Because
So-
Allah Ta'ala made them abandon it so that the people know who's who. And when you look at, now I'm not making fun of people, wallahi, but look up some of these videos of some of these Wahhabi sheikhs. I'm telling you, that's scary.
They're all memory TVs Wahhabis. the Israeli propaganda thing, memory TV.
Yeah.
It's all Wahhabi.
I'm not gonna name names. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
name names.
they do their job for them.
But some of the YouTube videos where the sheikh was never recorded because he didn't believe in recordings, but they have like one or two pictures. This is not something to write home about.
They're witch or something.
Let me tell you. I'm telling you, frowns, miserable, unkempt beard. Let me tell you another group, cause just so they were not just picking on Wahhabis. We pick on all these heretical Shia videos, right? Shia videos.
By the way, Gufia.
Gufia too. Too much stuff going on, right? And,
They're like doing weird stuff, and the sheikh is like doing power
Yeah.
moves on them, like
windmills.
That's like Street Fighter.
yeah.
He's doing like Hadouken moves on them.
Allah Ta'ala humiliates those paths so that the common Muslim who doesn't think twice, he's like, oh, I ain't going there. I ain't doing that. You know that my dad, there was some Gufia in that time. And my dad is generally against most of Sufis, I would say, right? Because when he was young, there was Goofy groups, and they had a parade one time
In Egypt.
and his dad wasn't like a man of like knowledge and into these things, common sense. When my dad went and came home and he said, "Oh, I ate dinner with the Rifa'is," right? He got beat.
Well, they're with the swords and
Yeah,
stuff.
with all the craziness,
Yeah.
right? So he never came near Sufis again, right? Now, here's the thing. The Shia, they have videos of a guy, he goes on the minbar looking respectable. You fast forward 20 minutes, the guy is turbans flying off, he's halfway falling off the minbar.
That's the guy that hit
smacking
himself with a bottle?
Hitting himself with a bottle.
A glass bottle.
He hit himself on the head.
Moeen
in the
hasn't been
mosque.
able to contain himself for the past 5 minutes.
I need to get my point in.
Why am I saying this? To show you that Allah Ta'ala, if you lie about transmission, He will humiliate you from yourself. He will. The name Al-Wajid, the divine name Al-Wajid, means He brings out something from where you least expect it. Like you were just making an argument. You were just talking normally like a human being. Why are you hitting yourself with the bottle?
Into that.
How is this benefiting Imam Hussein?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I mean,
All right, I need to get my point in. It's been like 20 minutes. Welcome to season 3, I guess.
MashaAllah.
There you go.
To play contrarian here,
What?
right? You know, what if I were to say that, hey, you know, what is the value of revealed knowledge, because everything that I see is, revealed knowledge just gives you, these sectarian conflicts, and you have caused all these problems in the world. It's like, why couldn't I just deal with empirical reality? Because clearly it's been working out for me. I got a job, I got a family.
Talk about devil's advocate.
It's a great point, right? Because that's lot. That's what a lot of people hear, which is all I see amongst religious people or people of revealed knowledge is just strife and sectarianism, and you got all these problems, and you guys hate each other and stuff.
But I would argue that even that accusation is not. It's not quantifiable. You can't prove or disprove that statement that there's more strife among. It's anecdotal. It's just based on things you hear. It's already that's kind of a statement that it doesn't have that much foundation, right? You can argue that the 5 deadliest leaders with the most kill counts were all secular leaders, right? And so there, I could come up with anecdotes like that too, that this caused so much strife and it caused so much terror in the world. So there's that aspect, and I feel like the other aspect is then, where are you getting guidance from? General just life guidance, totally, right? Because ultimately, when you're brought into this world, it's like you're on a moving train, right? You just find yourself on a moving train. And so the natural questions that somebody might have when they find themselves in a situation is, A, how did I get here? What am I doing here? And now that I'm here, what am I supposed to be doing? Right? And those are 3 kind of questions that I feel like just an existence that's just based on, like you mentioned, just a routine of hey, I go to work and I do these things and I provide for my family. Fine, it gives me happiness, all these things. But it still ultimately doesn't address those 3 questions. And I feel like if you don't address those 3 questions, then that stuff becomes inherently meaningless anyway, because it's why are you doing all that when eventually you're going to die, your kids are going to die, everybody's going to die, the heat death of the universe is going to destroy and it's literally from now, it's going to destroy everything, right? But then nothing has any import, right?
Origins, purpose of life, destination.
Well, the thing is,
what if
all this material success is a veil? That's all it is.
But what if I was to say that that doesn't, because all I see is
I don't know what to tell somebody like that except good luck.
Yeah, because because the 3 things that we just said also answer many legal quandaries, right? Which are the causes of major cultural wars. Yeah. Right. For example, abortion. Okay, and if we had a Sharia basis for it, right, you would know one piece of information, which is the cause of the whole cultural divide on abortion, which is, when does life start? Yeah. We only get that from Revelation, 120 days, right? So now we know the difference between murder and abortion, okay? Right. Or murder and the other thing, which is, I don't know what would we call that? Or abortion that is not murder, right? Okay. Which before in 120 days could be sinful, could be major sin, minor sin, it's debatable, but it's not murder. Yeah. Right. After 120 days is murder, right?
Even beyond the abortion example, I would say it's still even very difficult to separate modern so-called humanist or secular values or ways of living from some type of revealed origin, right?
Of course.
So it's very hard to tease that out. You can make a claim that hey, I'm good, I don't need revelation, I can live my life in this way. But indirectly, you've already adopted a lot of things and a lot of viewpoints that are basically directly due to revelation. It's why don't people kill other people? Why all these things that I guess we consider moral decisions, they have their roots in some sort of revelation. Otherwise, I could just do what I want.
Yeah. If you thought about it, if you think about it, materialist ideas are in a sense inherently incoherent, in the sense that if you devote yourself to thinking about atheism, for example, and you come to the conclusion of atheism, it only leads you to the fact that atheism is not important. If you come to the conclusion that there is nothing except the material, this conclusion necessitates that even your past thinking was not important. right? It meant nothing. So nothing means anything. There's
Yeah,
no.
you deny consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a materialist, so this is Daniel
But
Dennett.
consciousness
Yeah.
was used to arrive at that.
Right.
conclusion,
So Daniel Dennett is like, consciousness is an illusion, but somebody responded like, but an illusion is a conscious experience. So you have so
Yeah.
so
It's exactly it.
he's a
I
fake
think,
philosopher.
Moeen, what you're mentioning, right? Like where if people come with that angle of like, hey, like it doesn't really matter. A lot of times it's a case of not taking what they actually believe to its logical extreme,
Well,
which
that's
is
the thing.
some of those things that you end up getting, that like Nazmul mentioned, is that like you start denying these very basic things, but it's not everybody takes it to that logical conclusion. They don't take their ideology or how they live their life or whatever philosophy they have to its natural end, and so
mean-
they stop short of that.
Yeah, so the person that Moeen is bringing up is a person that's not going into that. He's not going into the depth,
The level of detail,
right? He's not
no.
thinking about. By the way, a lot of religious people are like that. They're not really considering the sources of the religion and the reality of it. They're just following what they're following. The person that Moeen is giving as an example is somebody who's like a materialist, and he's just following what he's following, and he's like, look, I have material success. I live in the West.
Yeah.
I have all these advantages. Things are good. This is why kufr is rampant in Europe, because Europe was successul for a long time.
Right.
Right?
And,
It's just
yeah.
automatic.
And now to play another contrarian point of view, which is, you got, we made the argument that, that revealed knowledge is beneficial and it provides guidance and all of these other things. Okay, great. Two parts of this question. The first is, why couldn't revealed knowledge go to anybody, right? Why does it have to go to, X prophet or Y prophet or whoever it may be? Why does it have to come from a certain source? And the second question is, well, a lot of different religions claim these mystical experiences, right?
Wait, is this the like we're? That's a very broad question, right?
Well, I mean, maybe
Yeah.
we can get into it, but
Okay,
like,
so
for
the
example,
first one-
a lot of religions claim like mystical experiences. Why trust one over the other?
Some of them might be real. There's a great article on it.
Well, just because you have a mystical experience doesn't mean you interpret it correctly.
Correct, right?
Like
Like
you
you don't
could
have the right theology.
Yeah, like for example, you could get punched, and you could think, oh, I didn't really get punched, so somebody just keeps punching you, and then you get knocked out.
Well, here's,
like
well,
if
here's
you-
something.
No, but you're talking about people like John of the Cross, right? Meister Eckhart, people who like Christian mystics who had
Yeah.
mystical experiences, and they've interpreted them completely the wrong
Well,
way.
exactly right.
Yeah, mystical experiences also, by the way, how do we come to learn about them? For them, it's an experience. For us, it's transmitted knowledge.
Right.
Transmitted knowledge from who? From the one who experienced it. Well, that's subjective then, right? So it's like no different than saying, "Hey, I saw X, Y, and Z." Well, why should I believe you? Who are you? Right? So it's in a sense for us, it's nothing other than a transmission, and a transmission from the only person who experienced it is subjective.
Right.
So the other answer to your question, which was, well, why would it have to come to that particular prophet or that particular person? Is that, well, okay, if hypothetically you could concede that there is a creator who's going to give a message, is he going to give the message to two different people? Then who are we going to listen to?
Right.
Right? You need to only give it to one. That's why every country has one ambassador, because communication must happen like that, right? Communication and systems organization, order, right, requires oneness.
Right.
Okay, and this is known. So that's the one. So if it's going to be one, then whomever it was given to, the same question would pop up.
Yeah.
Right? The same question would crop up. So
Also, I mean, to answer, maybe this answers your question, Moine. Maybe it doesn't. But
It's not my question. Let's
yeah. Okay, well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Kafir
Sorry.
online.
So let's say the hypothetical question, right? That somebody might pose. That's not Moine. I feel like another component of that is we don't necessarily base our belief on like magical and mystical happenings, right? Like that's not like the foundation of belief. And so, other streams of thought and other religions could have these experiences, and they can claim that like, hey, this stuff happened, but that doesn't have any bearing on our central belief, right? And I feel like with respect to those three questions that I posed earlier of like, how did I get here? Now that I'm here, what do I do? Like, why am I here? The how did I get here? You can arrive at that in some sense rationally, right? That there is a God and that he created all these things. But the other two things you can only really get from
Yes,
guidance.
correct. So what
So-
you're saying is, so the idea of the existence
Right.
of God is rationally.
Is rationally you can arrive at
you
that.
can arrive at that, but you can't arrive.
You don't
at
know
that
what he wants you to do
Exactly.
without guidance,
and
without
you
some
definitely don't
revelation.
know where
Right.
you're going.
And
Right.
And by the way, in terms of mystical experiences, we actually don't deny that Allah Ta'ala can answer the prayers of kafirs, right? The Allah Ta'ala, he gives the sun to everyone. He gives water to everyone. Everyone can smile. Everyone laughs. Everyone has kids. Everyone enjoys company, right? Like, why? Because Allah is merciful. He is kind. And also we need to live in this world, right? Everyone needs to survive. How can you survive, be so miserable? The human race wouldn't have continued, or this human species. Imam Abu Hanifa makes it very clear. Allah says in the Quran, أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ, right? He answers the desperate when he calls on him. He didn't say al-muttar al-mu'min, the desperate believer. So the idea of answered prayers, which definitely exists in Christianity, it does not mean you don't make the leap that my prayer was answered, therefore everything about me is correct, including my theology. No, we don't believe in that. We say, God answered you because he's kind. Doesn't necessarily mean you're correct in what you understand about him.
So
And
just quickly, I just wanted to read a couple of sentences to that end. This is from something Sheikh Nuh wrote, Islam, mysticism, and other religions. And it's, despite the abrogation of their religions, we do not doubt the possibility of mystics of other faiths reaching a higher spiritual plane. For when the lower soul is negated and sublimated by spiritual disciplines, the powers of the higher soul seldom fail to appear. And it is not impossible that in such a condition it might behold ultimate reality, which is, after all, as real and objective as Detroit or anything else in the physical world. But what a difference between the few hundred Jewish, Christian, or even American Indian mystics of the Western tradition who left any record of their experiences, and he names a few, and the literally thousands of Sufi masters of the Islamic tradition who founded the great mystical orders, had immense influence for centuries at all levels of society, produced an unparalleled and monumental body of mystic literature in poetry and prose, and left countless adepts in the beatitude of the divine presence, a living tradition that continues to this day. What other religion has ever seen a Mathnawi like Rumi's? There's a tremendous difference between a few outstanding spiritual personalities that appeared at times in places in the West, like occasional watering places scattered across a hinterland, and the throngs of mystics that the Islamic milieu on a sea of divine, the throngs of mystics of the Islamic milieu on a sea of the divine whose tides flooded regularly.
So even on that aspect,
We got the numbers, baby.
yeah, if we're going to admit that every time you put your ego down and you put your carnal element down, then the higher realities of the
They
unseen
become apparent.
if they become apparent. Let's say we admit that, all right. Well, let's see who has done it better then, right? So, and that's basically what I'm saying. So that's not even a problem. Mystical experiences. It's only people who don't understand that who fall into, well, therefore they make the leap. Therefore, all religions must be equal, and it's perennialism. That's the origin of perennialism. Is that
It
if
is
you look at
actually.
those
It's Kufiyya.
guys? Yeah, it's Kufiyya. They were a bunch of young guys. All of the leaders were a bunch of young guys. They followed the quack Frithjof Schuon, who was like a mystic, but he was just like in his own way, right?
Yeah.
And he had his own experiences and whatever. And they imagined then that everything that this man says is true. Right?
Right.
It's like, you know what it's like saying? Arnold Schwarzenegger was a great bodybuilder. Therefore, everything about biology that he says is true. Anatomy that he says is true.
Nutrition,
Right.
whatever.
Nutrition, yeah. It's not. That's not the case.
Right, exactly. I just want to jump in with this idea about mysticism. See, the fact that so many people have experienced something beyond the world or have seen the world as a whole or whatever, like this mystical experience, it actually proves that that empirical knowledge is not the only thing, right?
for sure.
It actually proves that there's something called revealed knowledge, right? Like
Or that there's an unseen.
there's an unseen, right?
No,
And
this,
and
this,
the,
the kafir in this example is a different kafir than the kafir.
yeah.
Why are you pointing at me, man?
No, well, you gave the example. I'm not.
Right.
I'm not. I'm
So-
not anathematizing.
So
you.
like what? So for example, Kant, one of the reasons that he says religion has a problem, right, is because all these people have the same mystical experience, and their arguments, are mutually, both of them, like they're two arguments that are exactly the same strength. This guy said he saw Vishnu.
Yeah.
This other guy said he saw.
Here's something.
Yeah,
that
but here's.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, you want
I
to?
was just going to say
yeah.
we have to remember that when Kant's talking about religion, he's talking about Christianity,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a religion that has no chain of transmission,
Right.
right, and a lot of other issues that Islam didn't have.
Yeah.
But
he
the,
knew a little bit about
yeah.
Islam, but from a completely Orientalist background.
Yeah, but the thing is that the main thing is that their argument is because so many people have had mystical experiences and they come to different conclusions. Let's reject all of religion.
Yeah, of course.
Now this doesn't make any logical sense,
Yeah,
right? Because
people all
right,
have
right,
the same brains and come to
exactly
the same
right.
rational conclusion.
Exactly. So, for example, philosophy, right? No two philosophers agree with each other.
Yeah.
So let's reject philosophy,
Let's
right?
reject intellect.
Actually,
Exactly.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So this, so it must mean, it doesn't mean that let's reject religion. It means that somebody's had the right experience and they have interpreted correctly,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
And one of the things that I find amazing about Islam is that it doesn't claim to be new, right? I forget one of Sheikh Hamza's shuyukh, like they had a lecture. He said something along the lines of like, all the prophets agree with each other
Yeah.
on the thing that's important, but all the philosophers disagree.
That's true.
Right? Right?
So
So
the prophets
yeah.
are on the same line.
exactly. So
Oh, wait,
like
yeah.
it's mystical experiences being confirmed all throughout history, the same exact thing, right?
And-
Like yeah.
Yeah, to get to the heart of the first part that you asked about why revelation to these and others, well, first you have to know about the rules of what makes a prophet, right? And why are those rules important? Why are the requirements there? Because, yeah, why would Allah send revelation to somebody like me? It'd be a waste of revelation, right? Like I don't have the characteristics of balagha. I'm not convincing people, right? Like it just would not be worth it, right? It would be a total waste. So you have to give it to somebody who's worthy of it, right? To quote Sheikh Nuhan, something like that, he said, when the king sends an ambassador, he doesn't send a monkey. You send the very best person that you have, right? And so the best of creation is the last of the messengers, because it's the message for all of mankind. And the messengers who preceded him were better than any other human beings besides him. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
And oftentimes people ask the question of, well, why doesn't he keep sending prophets, right?
It's done.
Well, we say to them, well, wouldn't he have to eventually? Everything has an end, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in your suggestion, even in your suggestion, whatever you suggest, there would be an end. There would be a time where
I guess every generation has to have their own one to be. Hey guys, remember? It's just
Exactly.
it's silliness.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry. And then the other part of that, actually forget.
I just
Go ahead.
All right,
keep
so I
starting
will.
people up.
The other part, just quickly.
Somebody.
Islam, and as a convert, I can tell you this because this is part of what motivated me to be a Muslim and to remain in this deen, is that Islam is the only religion that explains why there's multiple religions.
Exactly.
It acknowledges the
Number
multiplicity
one.
of religions and gives
Yep.
you a rational reason why they would be and why there would be
Yes.
differences
Yeah.
between them.
Yeah.
And explains to you how to understand their mystical.
Yeah.
mystics,
Exactly.
And it's the only religion that also gives a pass to the people who were unable to get
Yep.
this
Correct.
revelation, right?
Correct.
The rest of them, they're all exclusive.
Yeah.
Right? You ask a Christian, what happens to people that live in the Amazon that never heard of Jesus? Too bad, hellfire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
stupid. It's a
Let
stupid
me give
answer.
you
Or they just
something
make
else.
something up.
Let me
Yeah.
give you something else. There's no theology like Islam's that gives credence and power to willpower more than Islam.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at Judaism. You're either born into it or you're not.
Right.
So it's accident of birth.
Hinduism as well.
Yeah. Let's look at Christianity. Christianity, you're damned by original sin. Hey, I didn't do it, right? Someone else did it. And then you're saved because of someone else too.
Yeah.
So wait a second. I just got damned and I got saved. I'm like a spectator here, right? So Adam
Yeah.
took the original sin, of course, for their statement, right? And then Jesus got on the cross, and I'm watching, and I'm like, okay, like I didn't do anything, right?
Well, you did. You were lucky enough to be born to parents
it.
that baptized you.
And then now that you're saved, why do you have to do anything?
Exactly. Why do I need to do anything? So I got damned. I didn't do anything. I got damned.
Right.
I didn't do anything. I got saved, and I'm still not going to do anything, right? Because all I have to do is believe.
Right.
So now let's go to Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, you know that in Islam, if an
I
angel,
mean, there is purgatory.
yeah.
Sorry.
if an angel came down and said, all of you guys, here is Allah has permitted me to show you your book of deeds, okay, and all of you are damned to hell. If an angel came down with that, you know what the Prophet ﷺ said? He said, لا يرد القضاء إلا الدعاء. He said, nothing will repel what the destiny that's written for you except dua. So even if an angel came down and damned you and told you you are damned, I saw it in the book of deeds, in the book of destiny, right? The Prophet is telling you even that your dua can change it, because qada is any bad news, right? And portents of the future, right? The things that are going to happen in the future. The Prophet ﷺ said your prayer can push it back. And the Prophet has another hadith that said, لا يزال دعاء المؤمن والقدر يعترجان في السماء إلى يوم القيامة. Is that means qadar, bad things that are going to happen, will come down, right? They come down from the skies, and as when you meet that qadar on the timeline, it happens, right? Prophet ﷺ said, you throw up dua, you put up dua, right? It will wrestle with that qadar until the day of judgment. Meaning, you'll pass it. You'll pass under it. Your dua will act as an umbrella for you from this qadar. That's the power of dua. So here you have two religions, previously, and you said Hinduism too, okay? That there's no free will at this point in terms of saving myself. You're either born into it or not in Judaism. And in Christianity, I was damned and then saved, okay, by something that I didn't do. And here we have in Islam, even if an angel told you you're damned, you can save yourself by your own dua, right? So I mean, the power of free will is so critical.
There you go. And so my last point, and I think we can end on this because I think we're hitting time. In the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned, that there is a realm of theology and there is the realm of the jurist, right? And Islam balances both of these, very well, which is that, you have things like, for example, the ball hitting a window and, you have this assumed causation. However, in the mind of the jurist, right, you have actual real rulings that apply.
It's actionable.
Right, it's actionable rulings. So when it comes to the deen, or if someone was looking at revealed knowledge versus empirical knowledge, how do we reconcile both of these, when it comes to the realm of the jurist and the realm of the theologian?
Say the question again,
Right.
When it comes to
How do you reconcile? What is more important? Is it the realm of the revealed knowledge, the theology? This is a question someone might ask by hearing those 2 points, or is the realm of the jurist more important? What happens in the real world? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I would say that they have to be in equipoise, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
you need both of them in order to function in the world. Without the theologian, you can't get to the fiqh doesn't matter,
Right.
right? So, but and actually, I'll side on this. I'll go with the side. You have to know your aqidah. And your aqidah, you can't just take by you can't just do taqlid. You have to actually learn it and know it, right? So theology is actually more fundamental and basic. Because as long as you know what you're supposed to believe, even if you don't do any of it, you're better off than someone who's doing it and has the wrong belief, like a Qadiani or somebody.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the way I would answer it is in two ways. Number one, theology is over fiqh. Aqidah is more important than fiqh. That's the first thing, because beliefs are more important than actions, because beliefs is something you die with, actions end with your death. Beliefs is something you have all the time, actions you only do when you do them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that our theology rests upon reason and observation. If you look at something like the Kalam, cosmological argument, anything that has that begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And that cause must be causeless outside of time, space, materiality, cause and effect, right? So all of that whole idea is based upon reason, right? Basic rules of logic and observation. Basic what I see in the world. It leads me to believe that their God exists. Also, belief in the Prophet ﷺ is based in reason, right? It is based in reason. It's not just based in feeling, family, mystical experience. It's not based on those things. It's based in what we just said, the proofs of his prophecies. And we can draw a lot of those from the Quran too, right? But we just what I said earlier about prophecy. What is that? That's a logical argument, right? Because it says to me, how else do you explain this? Is he making stuff up? There's no other way to explain it except that he's actually truthful, right? So we say, and Imam Fakhr al-Razi's whole thesis and his whole argument against and his debate with Ibn Taymiyyah, okay, Al-Fakhr al-Razi and Ibn Taymiyyah obviously came after him and debated him, or in that time. But actually, could you look up their death dates, Fakhr al-Razi and Ibn Taymiyyah? The whole basis of Fakhr al-Razi is that our religion is based upon logical and observable basis.
Shouldn't Nazmul know Ibn Taymiyyah's day of death?
1210.
I think
Who was that?
Fakhruddin Razi.
Al-Fakhr al-Razi, 1210.
Ibn Taymiyyah is later, I think.
And Ibn Taymiyyah came
He's
after
born.
him.
He's born 1263.
Ibn Taymiyyah was born 1263, so he's way late. So Ibn Taymiyyah refuted he sought to refute Fakhr al-Razi. And Allegedly. Now, by the way, you know what my thesis on Ibn Taymiyyah is? He refuted them, but you know why he was such a great writer? Because he's trained by the Ash'aris. That's why. He was so powerful. He was powerful. You cannot deny that Ibn Taymiyyah is powerful.
Ibn Taymiyyah is he's almost like Sheikh Al-Akbar.
Yeah.
In terms of being like, there's nobody else. He didn't follow anybody else's, and he didn't really leave any real followers.
It's kind of weird. If I was reading through Sherman Jackson's book on his chapter on traditionalism, which he goes over Ibn Taymiyyah, like some parts of his theology are kind of like Ibn Arabi's. And people don't talk about that. Maybe it's a good PhD dissertation.
I mean, this is what happens when you're like a next level genius Sufi.
Yeah.
You start coming up with your own stuff.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Ibn Arabi, this is where they're similar.
Yeah.
Ibn Taymiyyah said, he argues against the idea of allegory, right, to the divine attributes, right? You guess who else does? Ibn Arabi says, yes, you're the allegory. Right?
Oh, snap.
He says, yes, the divine hand, that's real, and your hand is the allegory. Right? So it's the mystical version.
By the way, you know who else argued against allegorical? Forget about the divine attributes that can be changed to like body parts or whatever. Yeah. But even ideas like mercy. Yeah. And but this is also an Ibn Taymiyyah position, right? Maimonides.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So who did he take it from? Because he took a lot.
He took it from the Muslims.
Yeah, he took a lot from the Muslims.
He took it from the Muslims, and what it ends up doing is they get to the point where they go, no, either God doesn't have mercy because human beings are merciful, or what we think is mercy in human beings is something else because they can't share in that attribute. It becomes a co-sharer with Allah.
Maimonides, the Rambam, they call him the Rabbi Moses.
Rambam.
Rabbi Moses ben Maimonides, right? Ah. They call him the Rambam. So he is.
Is that like knock?
Yeah.
Is that like? So the Rambam was from Andalusia, and he actually became one of the doctors of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Rambam. Yeah. That's why there's hospitals named after him.
In New York.
Hospital, right? Because he was a doctor. And
he's a polymath.
In Yale,
theologian.
Right.
In Yale, I had two Jewish students, and one day they came early, and I was the only one there in class. So I just struck up a conversation. And I said, what do you guys, what about Maimonides, right? Do you guys study Maimonides? Because they were Orthodox. And Orthodox Jews are very strict. So they said, no, he's not accepted. He's a heretic, right? I said, how? He said, well, his theology he borrowed from the Muslims. I said, like what, though? They said, the idea of obligations in doctrine. The concept that there is obligatory beliefs, he included in it the belief in the afterlife.
Right.
Right? And they actually said, that no, and then one of the other students said, well, there's a verse in the Torah that maybe you could stretch it that there's an afterlife, but the idea that the afterlife is an obligatory belief, right? They considered that a heresy that they don't take from him anymore.
That's interesting,
right? And so it's liberal Jews who like call him that name, the hospital. The Orthodox actually don't observe him.
Yeah.
So that's all. But the whole point is that. You have something to say, right? Sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what.
So I was just going to say the whole point is.
That's great. That's amazing. No, please.
Like it's just let him talk, and then
no, that was great.
What you say is meaningless.
Yeah. It is though. I mean, to be fair.
So the whole point is that our belief is not a blind belief. No, there's no blind step. Let's take a leap. Let's just believe in the problem. No. There's a rational basis. The more you study, the more you come to this the idea that Allah and His Messenger, this is not some kind of a blind leap of faith. It's not.
Absolutely not.
Actually, the more I've studied, the more I actually, when you truly define a belief as something that you believe to be true without any rational, revealed, or empirical evidence, you actually come to hate beliefs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You hate beliefs because beliefs have no basis. They're superstitions.
Well, to bring it all back, that's what Hume said that empirical knowledge is just a belief formed on the basis of, well, I think this is going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I was going to add was coming back to what Moeen said about, I guess, the balance between like theology and jurisprudence. From let's take the example of prayer. The way I look at it is, from a theological perspective, you can learn why you need to pray, but it's only from the juristic perspective that you need to know the conditions and integrals required for performing the prayer.
Transmitted now.
Right. So that's kind of, I feel like, you have to have those two things in balance. Otherwise, belief and action then are just, you can't even correlate the two things.
Yeah, and to answer a part of my question myself is, I mean, even in the study of Aqidah, right? Aqida's other name is Fiqh al-Akbar, right? It's actually a subset of the study of fiqh, right? It's the greater fiqh.
Yep.
So you learn it before you even get into the subject of fiqh.
Yep.
And so I think we're hitting like a good amount of time. I think this is a good
an hour and a
place
half.
to wrap up.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up. Let me just close with one thing, since Ibn Taymiyyah,
90 minutes.
okay, rahimahullah, came up in the conversation. Now, you guys, I don't know if you guys are all off, but I just want to address this sort of silliness, in my opinion, that went on my page.
Oh,
Ibn Taymiyyah
God.
was quoted.
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I've been offline for a long time, writing coursework, right?
Doing
I've-
actual work.
Yeah.
from Hajj time until just like last week, I was pretty much offline the whole time. Now, someone came upon the idea. A friend came and said, "Listen, while you're offline, I know someone who could help you out, right? Who could help do posts for you, right?" So
Just like announcements and stuff.
yeah, like announcements, or take older
PR
posts,
manager.
right?
Repost them.
Like take a clip from an older post,
Yeah.
right? Put it up there. Now, at some point, though, this individual then put up a post which said Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, and it was something like totally normal, right? And they must have seen it somewhere, and they just assumed that I'd be fine with it, and they put it up there, right? So a lot of brothers got so sort of bent out of shape, right, that I just merely quoted Ibn Taymiyyah, right? And then now some people said they had a problem with the quote. Second, people had a problem with the term Shaykh al-Islam. Then other ones said rahimahullah. So I would say, okay, look, if we're really want to be about technically fine, Shaykh is enough, right? Because Shaykh al-Islam might imply everything about what he said is correct, which I don't believe. Right? I do believe that there were differences that are fundamental in issues of aqidah, right? Fine. Shaykh is fine. Shaykh, you could call men on the side of the road Shaykh, right?
My name's Sheikh.
Okay.
His name's Shaykh.
His name is Shaykh. So Shaykh is fine. Shaykh al-Islam, fine. Well, you can say that has an implication, fine. But some people had a problem saying rahimahullah, right?
What do you want him to say? Curse him?
They want to put him outside of Islam, right? So
It's ridiculous.
I'm not into extremes, right? This is an extreme, and you want to say that he's a kafir? That is way off from where I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm not even going near that.
That's beyond the pay grade.
And you know what? Yeah, and you know who I make taqleed? If I had to make taqleed on an issue that I don't know about and I'm not going to research, is Imam Suyuti. How's that? I mean, which scholar of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah will negate and have any criticism of Imam Suyuti? Imam Suyuti says Shaykh al-Islam had the qualifications to be a mujtahid. He had the knowledge to be a mujtahid, despite some errors that he made on the divine attributes and his whole thesis on reason and revelation. Right? That's Imam Suyuti. Right? That's the right way to do things. Right? Rather than going to an extreme.
Also,
Right.
you have to ask, what do people alive today care?
Yeah.
Why do you care
Yeah, exactly.
about what the fate of this scholar from, almost 1,000 years ago now?
Yeah.
What do you care?
Yeah. And I have made it my positions on issues of doctrine so clear on this podcast, on my Facebook page, on Twitter, right? I have at Divine Attributes, on the Asha'ira and who they are. I've made that so crystal clear. Like we have a saying in America, okay? Only Nixon could go to China, right? Means that someone who has been so right wing and so hawkish could meet with the enemy, right? And I'm not even saying that they're the enemy. And the Salafi brothers, they're not my of today that are sort of like cooled it down. We've said this before.
Yeah,
Right? They're
many
not
times,
my enemies, right? They might be someone else's enemies who are extreme in some extreme parts, right? But are the American imams who are sort of Salafi leaning or what have you? Well, they're not our enemies. They're okay. They have that belief, and they don't even delve into it and go into it. So The situation in America is a very different situation in Birmingham.
In Birmingham.
Oh god.
Let's just say it outright.
Oh god.
Also, listen, honestly,
America is not Birmingham. Let's.
whatever happened to assuming the best of your brothers?
Yeah,
Like, if there's an interpretation that's better, take that
right.
one and
Five
just
miles
stop.
exactly.
Right.
Just leave it alone. I'm off all social media too.
That's
I,
actually good for
I
you,
quit.
honestly.
I quit a few weeks ago
That is
after some back and forth about like it's
a
a
good move.
similar like
Listen,
somebody was like,
you
oh, how
only
can they
s-
say this about that?
you
person
only
who's
stand to
different?" And I was
gain.
like,
Who went after you?
nobody went after
what
me. We
group?
just had
What
a
issue?
discussion about. It was a thing. Somebody was hosting a conference and they gave like an honorific to somebody who doesn't deserve it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Legitimately doesn't
Yeah.
deserve it. But just assume
Yeah.
that they did it for a good reason or that
Or is it a mistake? I'm telling you, there are
even if it's a
mistakes that
mistake, let it. What do you got to make a big deal about
happen. Yeah,
it?
there are PR online internet mistakes that happen all the time, and a big organization like that, big organizations also have mistakes, right?
I'm
Stuff gets public.
a mainstream Ahl Sunnah Sunni Muslim because of the people in that organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So give me a break.
and give your elders some
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt. By the way, I was with Imam Zayd that whole weekend, right, where they got on him for that Elijah Muhammad. They got on him for his other issue. I was with him the whole time. He explained these things, right? He said, I didn't even agree that most of the people we didn't even want to be on the talk. They rented the space,
Yeah.
and they wanted to just talk about the historical effects. We said you could advertise it, and they didn't know that they're going to put the honorable. And you know, by the way, the honorable Elijah Muhammad, that's actually like,
That was my argument.
yeah,
It's just it's like somebody's a priest, a priest in Anglican. You call him the most reverend.
yeah.
I mean, everybody says Alexander.
Doesn't mean that he's
Alexander the Great.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean
exactly.
you're a kafir for
Yeah.
saying Alexander the Great.
Yeah, I mean that's
So
and that and that's the
Mahatma.
like,
Everybody says Mahatma
it's-
Gandhi, right?
even if
Like,
it's 100% wrong,
Yeah.
look, I'm
even
gonna
if it's
look up
100% wrong.
Yeah.
So what? These people are better than you anyway.
Yeah.
Sheikh Hamza,
Yeah. So,
I don't have to agree with everything that they do, but
yeah.
come on, man. Also, they're men in their 50s and 60s.
So that's the thing.
Have some-
There comes a point there.
Have some modesty about your young age
and how do you express yourself?
Yeah.
So,
It's like Mahatma Gandhi. It's like Mahatma is just
what does
like
Mahatma mean?
it's like just like a form of reverence. It's like the great.
You know that my kids go. I don't know if they have the Muslim kids a lot, but they get so confused by some names. Like we're talking about India. My daughter said, "What about Muhammad Gandhi?"
Muhammad Gandhi.
Muhammad Gandhi.
And you know who else they got totally confused with? Sayyidina Ibrahim Lincoln. They,
Oh,
they saw
son.
his face. I was
Yeah,
like,
he looks like a Hanafi.
Yeah.
He does.
So one of my last things that I put up before I quit Twitter was, you know that Sheikh Hamza is a Kentucky colonel, which is like a thing that the state of Kentucky does. They give you an honorary title as a colonel under the state for
Okay.
like
Yeah.
public service and
I see.
contributions to
It's an
society. or
order,
whatever.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
Like the colonel from KFC. That's the kind of colonel he
that's
was.
what I was saying, like Colonel Sanders.
Yeah. So the practice when you get that honorific, it's just like if you're the mayor or a governor or something like that, you're referred to as the honorable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's in that whole mess. I was like, it would be appropriate and customary to refer to
Yeah.
him as the honorable Sheikh Hamza Yusuf.
Imam Zayd actually put out what do you call an article like addressing all these points like
Yeah.
just recently.
Oh really?
Like yeah, I actually thought it was problematic when it initially happened because there
This
was
is
all
the
this.
kind of people I'm dealing with on Twitter.
No, I mean, but then like he actually said like that he himself didn't agree with it, and also like this using that term didn't imply anything about him because everybody who knows who Elijah Muhammad is would not be confused that that's Islam, right?
Yeah, this is my
So,
whole
yeah,
argument.
yeah,
Like
right.
it's self-evident.
Exactly right.
Number one, of course we don't like. Of course we don't honor him. We don't think highly of him. He was more than a kafir, right? He was somebody who claimed prophethood. He was right. So we leave that alone. But we also know that that's just an official title.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to
It's not like
flip
you
out.
mean it.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
flip out if somebody goes to speak at a masjid and we
Yeah.
advertise and go, the most reverend so-and-so, and they'll be like, what? He worships a man.
I mean,
he's
if
a
every-
mushrik.
If
Right? Like, come on,
If
man.
everything's that literal, then it's like you can't even use like the names of the days of the week
Right,
because
well,
they
you can't
refer
say
to
you can't
pagan.
say
You
Thor's
can't say
Day,
Thursday.
you can't say Odin's Day.
So it's like all those people. Like, what are you doing then
Well,
at that
and
point?
the
You're
thing
taking
is
it
there's-
literally.
Like Hassan al-Basri, Imam Hassan al-Basri says, give your Muslims 73 excuses. So we have to think about that
Right.
when it comes to a post. This is a post. This is not a policy. This is not a theological essay that he wrote, right?
Not to mention
It's
that
a post.
the end
so
of-
just have a
Yeah,
husn't done about
the
it.
end
Can-
of the end of the end of that saying is also, and if you don't find it, no, accept that the issue is with you're the one with the problem, not
Yeah.
your brother.
How about
Look for 70, and if you can't find it, it's you.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a random person. We're not talking about someone with a bad track record. We are talking about people who have done khidmah of deen for 30 and 40 years. Okay? So they have a track record of trying to be on the truth and of being on the truth. So we're not talking about someone like Reza Aslan who has the opposite track record,
He's not even
right?
Muslim.
Yeah. So we're not talking about that. So let's go to Husn al-Dhan and have and not forget.
And let's let Moeen get out of here.
All right.
Yeah,
let's-
I was just gonna say, just to close it off, you know what, the 100 square miles of Birmingham is not the you know, the
It is a
end-all.
hot spot, though, man.
So
They've got everything there.
we do have a lot of listeners from Birmingham, but I just want to say that
Not Mufti Abu Layth, right?
Do you call him a mufti? So that's
yeah,
another
exactly.
I'm a kafir now. I shouldn't even call him Abu Layth.
see, you know, the cultural landscape and the understanding of American Muslims, and I would even say if you went even deep, like if you went to Philadelphia, the culture of the Muslims in Philadelphia is different than the culture of Muslims in New York City, right? As the culture of Muslims in India versus the culture of
That's true.
Muslims in Birmingham versus the culture of
Egypt.
Muslims in Canada or Egypt, right? So I mean, you gotta address things in their like context, right?
Moeen's really sharp beard and haircut attest to the fact that
That's true. He's
I
been
noticed
doing
the culture
it
of
too
Philly
I
much.
has
noticed
taken
that
over.
today, mashallah, man.
he's working in Philly now, and he comes back
I
looking
see-
sharp.
I was like, "Whoa, you look."
For the people who don't know, one time I was in the area and I saw, you know, that picture that has all the different cuts, right?
Yeah.
And all the way in the bottom right,
They got the Sunni.
it said Sunnah cut.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's called the Sunni.
The
That
Sun-
beard is
yeah.
even called the Sunni. You know, in
Yeah.
Philly and stuff.
Hey, can I say something really quick?
So
All right. So remember we were having that discussion today about that article that Imam Mark Manley had written that Mufti Niaz forwarded?
yes,
It's a good article. Maybe we should post it or something. But I just want to say that when I was in, I spent just a few days in Morocco over the summer. And I had the same feeling that I had whenever I go in the Muslim world, but it was more pronounced this time, which was that, and I didn't have an explanation for it. It's just a feeling that being Muslim in a place like that is actually possible, which means that the counter of that is true as well, which is being Muslim in a country like this, it's maybe not fully possible. And
Which, like what?
like being Muslim in America is not fully possible.
like
right?
being Muslim is like what I
Like-
posted on the group is like, you know, just being a proper, normal, everyday Muslim, praying your 5 times a day, giving your zakat, helping the poor, you know, visiting the sick.
Is you saying it's not possible?
It's much more difficult here, right?
Yeah. So what Imam Mark was saying is that we, in all of this, trying to fight to preserve our deen, sometimes we overlook just the sheer joy of being a Muslim, right? Just living our life and telling our families about how happy we are that we're Muslim, and just like it was pre 9/11, right?
Yeah.
Before people started attacking Islam, and then people started defending Islam, and then people started selling out their Islam so that they could be accepted, and then the next people came to defend from that,
Yeah.
and this is the whole cycle that we've been going through, and that's all we're doing now is being reactive and reactionary instead of just being Muslim.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true. And when I'm in the Muslim world, and this last time I felt it more pronounced. It just felt like if I lived here, and I wasn't even in like Fez, I was in Marrakesh,
Yeah.
right? I just felt like if I lived here, it would be so easy to be a Muslim
Yeah.
all the time, right? I wouldn't have to ever think about it. Even.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm in America, it's constantly work just to be on my Islam.
Well, maybe there's more reward then.
Inshallah, it just felt good over there.
Can I mention just one thing?
No,
Just,
no.
You're the new guy. You don't get the last comment.
this guy discrimination over here. But
Go for
just as a positive note, like I think that I think especially in this country, we're in a situation very much like the Meccan situation, where the Meccan situation produced the best believers, right? Like you don't have
Pressure.
you don't have pressure. You also the 10 people promised paradise are all from Mecca, right? Yeah. So like you don't. So
I
I think
want to
that
follow their example and make hijrah.
no, sure, I agree with that, but I think like Islam, I think like history has shown that Islam really shows itself under pressure.
Yeah.
Like, and
That's
I
very
think
true.
I think that's a quality of the truth. Like one of the reasons that I find Islam personally convincing is that it's able to deal with so much diversity, right? When it's put under pressure, it has a response to it,
It
right?
blossoms, actually.
It actually blossoms, right? And I think like that's that unique opportunity here in America. So I just want to be optimistic about that.
That was very
And-
beautiful, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is
So
beautiful.
No,
yeah.
no.
And we got to blossom and do something that maybe some other groups did, and that is connect with the poor parts of the country.
Subhanallah.
And I don't know if we said this before, but we have a group that makes a run every week. If I had the money, I would make that run every day. We make a run with about maybe 50 or 60 containers of food to the local area that's really poor, day laborers, drunks, and all that stuff. People who are like chronically drunk. In my opinion, are chronically high on something. They're done. They're cracked. Their brains are fried. Whether they're guilty for doing that themselves or not, who knows? But in my opinion, is like some people, you just have to take care of them for life. There's no getting them out of a rut, right? They're in the rut permanently. You just help them and make it easier and give them food. I really believe that that's what Muslims should be focused on.
And winter's coming.
Oh, winter!
Yeah.
Not only that, the winter, the allegorical winter of another economic downturn. You see it in the news every day. They're predicting
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're bubbling, so.
Yeah.
Bad markets.
Exactly. And what kind of response are we going to have? Are we going to have a response just worrying about ourselves and crying and all that stuff? All right, so let's wrap it up. Jazakumullah khair. This was the first episode of season 3, S3E1,
Yo, boy.
right? So, mashallah, Jazakumullah khairan. And Wayne, you want to wrap it up?
That's it. Inshallah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nazma, for the time and coming out. And
Thank you. You should be
may
thanking
Allah-
us.
may Allah-
He's a rookie.
Thank you.
Thank us for letting you be here.
It's an honor to be in the same table as Dr. Shadi
No,
and the other people. So
I'm just
Jazakallah
messing with
khair. No, I really mean that. So
No, but you did a great job. man.
All right.
You did a great job.
All right, we're looking forward to
You added the
Nazmul's
neutrino.
episode next week or the week after, I think. So listen to that.
Great
That's a great
Inshallah.
breakdown on theodicy and the problem of evil. So look forward to that, and inshallah, we'll talk to you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.
Saad, Wayne, great job.